Ed's having a great day.
I am just so irritated at this point.
Nothing works ever, and we're constantly having some kind of issue, some kind of computer thing. I can't log in, he can't log in, and today he can't log in, he can't connect to the internet.
Every single time you move around this building, it's like something else is going on.
And you know we're moving in chicken.
And they've put so many protections in now, so you have to like enter your password and enter the code and enter do this, do that, just to get on the freaking internet. What is happening here?
So we're trying our best to get through it. We're trying to get over the hump on this hump day and make it happen. What is that even?
I don't even know.
Oh boy.
So my mom sends me, my mom is in China right now. They're on vacation.
I forgot she was going to China.
So she sends me a text message yesterday and she goes, Edward, what's with the no tie look? And I'm like, well, I'm just trying something out, you know, like trying to be a little bit cool, trying to switch things up a little bit. And I said, you don't like it? She goes, no.
No approval from Jan.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Right, okay. She likes her son buttoned up, ready to go.
So DJ's going to yell at me that I left my tie on this morning, but it is what it is. And
It's for Jan.
yeah. Do I need a hug and a martini? A martini is more like it. Hug, maybe not.
Martini.
But I do love you all.
Only espresso martinis. The martinis with olives are nasty.
It's that me.
Me espresso. What are we talking about today?
Okay, so, oh my God, I knew it can't just be me or us or you. It's Mary also. I'm telling you, it's so annoying. Okay, let's talk about this. I think this is really interesting. And, you know, of course, this is like a generation divide, I think.
Yeah, I want to see where you stand on this. Just because, I mean, we had different experiences growing up and how we got to school every day. But at Sweet Home, they're dealing with the bus driver shortage. We've talked about it a bunch of times. Right. They've got all these buses, no one to drive them. So what are we going to do to get kids to school every day? All right, we're going to change up the start time so that middle and high school closer aligned so that, you know, they can get to school. And they're going to cut off bus access for kids who live a quarter mile or within a quarter mile from the elementary school. So if you live a quarter mile away from the school and you're in elementary school, starting next year, your kid's going to be walking.
Okay, here's the thing. This cannot be that big of a deal, despite the outrage. Here's why I'm saying this. Because for years, we have sent our kids to school. Some kids walked, some kids took the bus, and nothing has happened. And I'm going to say this. I also was one of those kids who was considered a walker in elementary school. I lived 0.3 of a mile away from my elementary school. But just because I was considered a walker, exactly, Sarah, a quarter mile is nothing to walk. Just because I was considered a walker doesn't mean that I was walking to school. You know,
you can get a ride.
You can get a ride. And look, it takes a village, right? It's not easy for these parents. So I see both sides. But, you know, my grandparents were driving me to work, driving me to school, rather. My parents were working, so they were out of the house before I even went to school. But the reality is there are so many avenues outside of just sending your 5-year-old on a walk to school to get them to the building.
Yeah, I think the initial news is always going to be jarring to parents. They're going to be like, what? You want my 5-6-year-old to walk by themselves in the morning, in the dark, in the snow? Are they going to shovel the sidewalks? What are they going to do? I can understand that fear. And I didn't walk to school. I was never close enough to school to walk. And none of my friends walked to school. I feel like, you know, generations get a little softer as we go along, and I certainly would have thrown a fit if I had to walk to school.
Right.
But it does happen. There are several other districts here. Sweet Home is not the first one to do this. There are other districts that do this kind of thing. Kelly says, good morning. My kids chose to walk to and from, and they live 1.5 miles away. Good gracious.
Okay, so kind of on the opposite side of things, Jill saying, these aren't those days.
Yeah, and it's scary as far as safety goes, right? Are they going to be okay? You know, back in the day, people used to leave their doors unlocked. You can't really do that anymore.
Were you a latchkey kid?
What is that? You get the key?
Yeah. Did you ever let yourself in after school?
Only like not until I was very much older, like not until high school.
Okay. So my mom will hate that I'm saying this, but she doesn't want to admit the truth. I was a latchkey kid. I would come home from school, and unless my grandparents were there, I would let myself in, and I would be alone until my
And do
mom
your
came home
thing.
from work. I would do my homework, watch MTV, and be fine. Like, look at how I turned out.
Well,
Crazy.
you have to remember that like I'm the baby too, and I
Yeah.
was like the only one in the house at the time. So my parents were definitely really protective of me and like coming home. So it took a while before I was able to like stay at home by myself and do all these things. But once the trust was there and we got through it, I was able to stay home and I felt just fine.
Kelly says my kids walked every day until they got to high school. Then it was too far away from them. Ninny, good morning to you, Ninny.
Morning.
Pay the bus drivers more money. Well, and is that
They've been trying though.
right? Is that the impetus here? Are we not paying these people enough to drive school buses, which then is the root cause of these drivers not having, or there not being enough drivers?
Right, but you go past any of these buses or any of these school districts, and they have a giant bus out there with a sign that says, "Hey, we'll pay you however much you want at this point. We're
Right.
gonna pay for your training. We'll waive fees. We'll do." They're trying to like get rid of all the barriers to becoming a school bus driver and pay these people, what they deserve. But they're at a point where they just don't have enough people.
Kelly says, honestly, don't think elementary kids should walk. Their focus is off. Sarah says, I would drive a school bus if it paid enough. What would it have to pay, Sarah, for you to drive? Diane, my kids were latchkey. They both walked to school and called me at work when they came home. That's exactly what I did. I literally can still remember my
From the
mom's phone
landline.
number, 582-8900. I haven't called that number in probably 25 years. But like, I can still remember calling and speaking to the receptionist and I'm sure they hated hearing from me every single day, but like you still had to call your mom and let her know that you were home from school and that you were safe. Like nowadays we're so used to that instant gratification, that
Right.
instant
That
communication with the
text.
cell phone, right? That it's completely different. But, does that make us more anxious in a sense?
Yeah, I don't know. Mark says school bus drivers get more money than starter NFTA drivers.
Interesting. Jill, but now grandparents are working, she says, till
Yeah.
67. My mom was home for the kids to get off the bus. These aren't those days.
Times have certainly changed. You can't ignore that. But I do think these kids are going to be okay. I don't know. I mostly worry about the cold. Walking in the
Sure.
cold, obviously, hopefully they can get a ride. And some of these parents who were concerned, some of these grandparents said, let's come together and do like a neighborhood watch. Let's get all the grandmas and grandpas together and we can carpool with them or we can walk with them. I'm sure they'll do everything they can to keep these kids safe and it will end up being fine. But I understand the immediate shock.
I'm laughing really at what Jeff Baker is saying, but you called it 2,500
That number,
times.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, Mom, Dana's being mean to me, or Mom, I can't get Dana to do X, Y, and Z.
Poor Dana.
Exactly. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but there were 5 of us walking together, and that's what they're saying, walk in groups. Kelly says, I was latchkey. We had to. My mom was a single mom.
Yeah.
Anita saying, with cameras, it's so much easier to keep an eye on your kids. Mary saying that we wore leggings over our pants.
I used to love being home alone. I would karaoke the house down. I would put that, and I would just be singing,
I still do that.
screaming. Oh my god, yeah, I still do too.
Kelly says they better make sure the sidewalks are shoveled, and I think that's oh, my sister's actually here.
I was never mean to you.
Who knew?
I'm sure you weren't, Dana. I honestly, poor Dana, I'm having to deal with that.
I guarantee you that I called once or twice when she was acting up.
Dana's not letting me do this.
Right, exactly.
And what's your mom gonna do from there?
Nothing.
Put Dana on the phone.
Right.
Like what?
Edward, I'm at work. Russell still does that to me. Edward, I can't deal with this. I'm at work.
So funny.
This is an interesting comment. Mallory. Oh, interesting way to spell your name, Mallory. I use an air tag to track my son. The Buffalo buses are terrible. Everyone's siding with Dana.
I love
no!
Dana. Team Dana. Team
You
Dana.
just don't know her. No, she is the best. I'm so lucky.
With this Life 360, these air tags, and all the ways we can keep track of kids these days, does that increase anxiety? I mean, like at a certain point, imagine you're Jan and Ed's doing, he's a latchkey kid, he's calling you from work. You just have to kind of trust that they'll be okay.
Right.
But nowadays, like, does that add extra anxiety? Let me check to make sure they made it on the buses or this or that.
That's a great point. And, Aaron, our boss, our news director, is with us. Shout out to single working moms and the neighbors who helped keep an eye on us.
I mean,
It's
that's
true.
huge. It takes a village, and you got to hope that, the person living next to you is watching out for the little
Exactly.
ones.
And so I remember distinctly across the street, our 2 neighbors, Debbie and Barry, they were like our second parents. Debbie is the best. And her husband, Barry, every time I would see him, he'd go, Edward, and I'd say Barry, and he'd go, But like, those things are like how you trust an adult. You know what I mean? As a
Yeah.
kid, you kind of understand that if something happens, you go to Debbie and Barry's house. They always had a key to our house. So if we got locked out, they would help let us in. You just knew that these were the people in your life who would help.
You got to build community. Elizabeth asking, will this affect Buffalo buses? No, this is just Sweet Home where they're doing this, but there are other districts that already do this. I mean, Buffalo public school kids, a lot of them use public transit to get to and from. So it's a different deal with every district, but there are a lot of kids who are walking out there.
Nini says, I know 2 bus drivers and you might want to hear from them. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to hear what they go through day to day.
Oh my gosh, that'd be a great story. Please send us their information or send our information to them so they can reach out if they're willing to. I'd love to do like a ride along or something if that would be allowed.
Nini, you know how to get in touch with me, Nini. There it is.
Text or call.
I love that there's already a pre-made super for this. You guys are so funny. Lauren is so funny because she can relate to Dana because she grew up with a Russell. Yes. And I can still relate to Lauren because I am still dealing with a Russell.
Rihanna says, honestly, I walked when I was in middle school. I lived in Kenmore, so there were sidewalks and it wasn't a busy area. Sweet Home is a busy area. Accidents happen often in that area. And you're right. But the middle and high schools are on busy roads. And that's why they're not making the middle and high schoolers walk the elementary school in a much more residential area. So the idea is that quarter-mile walk, they're on sidewalks, it'll be safe and it'll be good for them. But I don't know. Oh, do we have that sound too from the meeting?
Yep. Okay, we do have that. We'll get to that in just a second. They're driving now. Okay, no problem. Okay, I want to address this comment from Kelly, and then we can get to the sound because I think it's really interesting to kind of point and counterpoint here. Kelly says, Ed, would you be worried if it was your nieces and nephew walking to school? I think once you're forced into the situation, it makes a difference. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I agree with what Anita said. I think it's all based on maturity. I think that we have to understand that our children need to have some sort of high stakes responsibility.
You can only hold their hand for so long.
Right.
And they want that. They crave. I mean, how early when you're with the kid, they're like, oh, I want to be a big kid. No, I'm a big kid. Let me do it. Let me hold it. They want that. They crave that responsibility, but you have to give it to them in order for them to learn, or else they're scared to walk to the school when they're 16.
And let me be perfectly clear. I am not a parent, so I genuinely cannot speak as one. But would I be afraid of Alana walking to school at 8 or 9 years old? Probably not.
But she's a smart kid.
Right. I understand the concern. Now, if she lived closer to school, it would be a different story. I mean, taking the bus is one thing when you're a little bit further away. But if you're, like I said, I grew up 0.3 of a mile away from school. And I remember walking home in 5th grade and not thinking anything of it. I walked past my friend's house. My grandparents picked me up. I can't. I understand what we're saying, that it's not those days anymore, but why isn't it those days anymore? Is it because we're too hyper aware of what's going on because we're constantly on our phones, or is it a matter of we just have to give our children that kind of benefit of the doubt here that they will do the right thing?
My mom still checks my location. She'll be like, we're checking in, or I'll be like out at my friend's house and she's like, where are you? And I'm like, girl, you have my location.
Heather says, if you have concerns, drive your kids to school. And
Great
that's
point.
what I'm
And
saying.
you still can.
Right, exactly. Just because they're just because they're walking doesn't mean that they are actually using their 2 feet.
Nanny says carpool. Again, great idea.
Yeah, Lauren, she's smart, but they still need reminders of what's right and wrong. Fair enough. Oh my God, Ed, I would 9. That's very young. Jeff says there are creeps everywhere. The schools need to figure it out. Kids shouldn't be walking these days. Interesting perspective. I mean, and like I said, I'm not a parent. I'm just speaking, kind of as the devil's advocate here, thinking like, okay, well, what's the alternative here? And why is this any different than what any of us went through?
Yeah, Crystal says both my girls have Life 360 on their phone. One is 20, one is almost 14. Youngest takes the bus, but in high school, so she will walk. I think that probably, Crystal, makes you feel better, right? You know where your kids are, you know what's going on. It probably puts your mind at ease. I mean, back in the day when that wasn't even an option, you just kind of had to deal with it. But now we have the access. We have the ability to check on our kids and make sure things are okay.
Lindsay says that responsibility is growing their prefrontal cortex of their brain. Risk management, creativity, coping skills, independence. And that's kind of my point, right? Like, we need to let them grow. We need to let them evolve. And your dad is right here. Parents helping parents is key. Anita really worried about the traffic and drivers. Drivers are so distracted and kids are small. That's a great point, too. And to that point, as you mentioned, there was a little bit of a contentious meeting last night in Sweet Home as parents discussed this issue. So listen to what they had to say.
parent, I would be walking with them or driving them. I'm a working parent as well. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. We're not doing this.
Why did we vote on it then, though? That's
Yeah,
the
we-
thing
So
that I
we're gonna
don't-
have 6 months of work where nothing happens?
So a little bit of, heat from this Sweet Home
Back
board
and
meeting.
forth, which again, I understand. Like I would be scared too. Just immediately hearing, okay, we want your 9-year-old to walk. They'll figure it out. Hopefully, it'll be good. I mean, I guess you could like map it out with them, walk with them. Like you could practice the walk. Let's do it on a Saturday and when it's a little busier. But I mean,
Aaron says, I remember as a kid wanting to walk home alone, and my mom finally let me do it in my middle school. I think it all depends on your child. Absolutely right. Like when do you give them a key to the house? What age is too young to have a key to the house?
I think I was like 11, maybe. Dad, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think I was 11 or 12. Maybe 13. It was maybe like middle high school. I don't really remember, but I remember I got my first phone when I was 10. So I mean, that's responsibility right there.
Yes. Heather says, if you don't let children begin to learn responsibility, how are they going to learn and thrive as they get older? Working in higher education, I see what a disservice many parents are doing to their children now. They need to grow.
Also a very good perspective there. I mean, I think that's the point we were trying to make with, trusting these kids. And you got to know your kid. If you've got a kid who, maybe is a little off the walls and you don't trust them and they need a little bit more time before getting that responsibility, you walk with them, you drive them. But if you have a kid that you can trust, I think as a parent, I can only imagine. I'm not a parent either, so I don't know what that's like, but you got to kind of let the bird fly out of the nest, if you will.
Crystal says, my kid was 13 when she got keys to the house. I'll tell you, I got keys to the house and still called my grandma to come pick me up because I was too afraid to stay home alone.
Aw.
I hated, honestly, I still am like this. I'm so like observant of what's going on around me. Like
Any little creak in the house.
or
you're
like that truck is not out there, should not be there. Why is it there? Who's in that truck?
Oh, I get so paranoid because of the time we have to leave the house. When I leave, I mean, it's like 3:30 when I'm taking Reese out. I am like on my P's and Q's. I'm like, did I just hear something?
Right.
Is someone walking out here? Did I just see a car? Why is anyone else up right now? Sometimes there are deer out there. Like it's so scary to just be going to and from. There's a weird car.
Yeah.
That person's lingering. Even this morning, I noticed that guy who was like outside of our building.
Yeah, that was interesting. He was kind of just a little disheveled walking around. Something was up.
No, I waited. I knew Ed was going to get there, so I waited till I got there to get out of the car because I was not about to have that situation.
Jessica says, my son had a key in elementary school. Responsibility is taught.
For
Interesting
sure.
conversation.
Lauren says I get both sides so hard. I don't trust other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, speaking of responsibility, here's a good one for you. And this is one that, we've been following for the last couple of days now after the investigative Post broke this story of a possible cover-up of Erie County Sheriff John Garcia for one of his chiefs of narcotics. So what does that mean? There last year was a car crash with this chief involving, I believe, 7 cars on Buffalo's west side.
Yep.
There are claims out there that he was impaired while he was driving
People
and
called
crashed.
911 and said there was a hit and run.
He crashed into these 7 cars, according to a lawsuit. And there have been settlements with Erie County for a total of $60,000. Taxpayer cost here, 60 grand. But yesterday in this press conference here about a big drug bust, and you can see the guy on the right in that,
Gray suit.
his name is Dan Granville. And he's been with the sheriff's office for a while, a name for certain in the department. Here he is again in the gray suit on the left. But when asked about this, he had no comment. He said he had no comment. That was his comment. But also, when you ask Sheriff Garcia about his thoughts on this, he's very cavalier in just saying, oh, it was just a car crash.
It happened a year ago. It was a car crash. We asked if they were doing an internal investigation. He's like, no, it's just a car crash from what I know right now until I hear more information. Watching that press conference was interesting. This news came out. It was first reported by the Investigative Post. And then we found out about this separate drug bust. So we went to this press conference, and I honestly didn't think that Chief Granville was going to be there, knowing that all this heat was on him, but he was there. So this is our chance to ask this question point blank. This is taxpayer money. This is a car crash, whatever you want to call it. Something happened a year ago. is there any transparency? Is there anything you want to say about it? And they said nothing.
And here's the problem. Why is he above the law? Right. If this was John Q. Public, what would have happened?
Oh, yeah.
If, there are claims that you were intoxicated or impaired in some capacity, chances are you're going to be drug tested or you're going to be given a breathalyzer or done a field sobriety test. None of that was done. And you're right, Connie, his sister-in-law was the one working for the Buffalo Police Department who responded to the scene and did
not
nothing.
test him. No breathalyzer, no nothing.
So
this smells. This whole thing is just iffy. And you would think, okay, here's an opportunity for us to address this head on at a press conference. Everyone from the news is going to be there. Maybe we can say something. But we asked all the right questions and came up with nothing.
it was,
He's picking the right words.
yes, I don't want to. It was bad.
It was a bad look.
It was bad, and let me tell you why it was bad. Because this is a problem now. The Erie County Sheriff is an elected position.
Yep.
You are picked by the people to serve the people at an expense to
Paid
the
by the
county
people.
taxpayers. When you want to pretend that something doesn't exist, or you're trying to minimize its impact, and there are people who have, I wouldn't say suffer, but have been impacted,
Mm-hmm.
there's a problem.
We deserve to know. And I think that's that transparency we are begging for on multiple levels of government. And this is another example of that lack of transparency. We're asking you questions, and we asked Chief Granville directly, and of course he said he had no comment. And Kristen was in the room, and she said, well, where is that transparency?
Right. And I kind of want to connect the dots for you a little bit. We have the receipts here. We have the proof that something happened with a lawsuit from one of the people's cars that Granville is accused of hitting. Again, Granville on the right here in that gray suit, standing next to the sheriff. We know that Erie County has settled with other people who were affected by this, yet Erie County Sheriff John Garcia says they, as in the sheriff's office, aren't really doing anything. They're not doing their own internal investigation. Nothing has happened to Granville.
Right.
Despite all of this backstory, he's still on the job.
So then we take questions to the acting mayor, Chris Scanlon, because Buffalo police are the ones who responded to this car crash, as they're calling it. And he wasn't exactly forthcoming either. I mean, he was like, look, I wasn't mayor at the time. I'm just coming into this administration, and he can only do so much. It's a personnel matter, so he doesn't get much information. And he was, he was pretty candid about that, but he really couldn't tell us much either.
Mark has a great question. Was his sister on duty, or did she just show up? It's his sister-in-law, first of all, Mark, but as far as we know, she was on duty. I mean, I can't really tell one way or another because she's the one who signed off on the reports. Crystal says, this reminds me too much of the doctor who killed the girl on her skateboard, talking about Dr. Corasanti with Alex Rice. It is something that obviously has now come to light, but when you are pressing these elected officials and they cannot say, look, and this is maybe, as a reporter, I would have asked two questions. Number one, I would have asked directly about the cover-up. What I would have said is, this happened, that happened. We see the finality of we see the conclusion of what happened, but are you covering up for your deputy? That's what I would have asked. Because if he's not, then okay, then that leads to a follow-up question. Well, then why haven't you taken action to investigate what happened here?
Right. And I think that lack of action is the thing here, because why not? If something happened, right? Don't you want the people you're working with to be held accountable? If I did something wrong, you would want me to deal with that, or
Right.
to tell you did that wrong, you'd have to fix this or whatever. And I would want you to call me out. You'd want me to call you out if you were doing something wrong.
Absolutely.
If there's something that needs to happen, if there are consequences, he's got to be held accountable. Why not hold him accountable for something that happened?
Jessica says the state covers a ton of things up. Just look at the correctional facilities. They only cared about themselves, prisons and COs, to the hospital without a toxicology report. That's why he wasn't given a DUI, DWI. Connie says, I wish you were there, Ed. And then, so finally, I would have had another question too. When we're talking about a possible cover-up, at what point do we say enough is enough? How can you not answer a question like that in terms of, well, that's never mind.
I know. I just I want to ask him, have you learned from your mistake? I don't know.
The guy's the chief of narcotics and is accused of being impaired,
hitting several cars.
Tracy says there is no reason for him to be above the law. Why? Who is he that nothing happened? Why doesn't he get punished like anyone else? You would be all over any average guy. He would be in handcuffs, but not this guy.
And why are they covering up for him?
The rich will not be accountable. Look at our government, is what Carlos says. 2025 is the year of enough is enough. At a cost of tens of thousands of dollars to taxpayers. Do you think that this will affect his election? We're talking Garcia.
Mhm.
Do you? Because he's up for re-election.
Yeah.
Do we think that this will impact his chances of serving Erie County as the sheriff once again? Mind you, this also happened in a county car.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? How is this? How are we letting this happen and just being okay with it?
Kim says it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Interesting. Well,
some tea spilled.
This
yesterday.
will be a conversation that I don't think goes away, because when you consider, I remember when, back during that snowstorm in 2022, I caught a lot of flack for asking then Mayor Byron Brown if he felt he should resign because of the way he handled the response to that deadly blizzard. I caught a lot of flack. And I don't regret asking that question, because it was a fair question, because a lot of people behind the scenes were saying this guy did not handle the response the right way. Ultimately, he resigned years later. Besides the point. But is this big enough to ask for his resignation?
Garcia.
Yeah. Is this big enough to say, we have no faith in you as sheriff?
From what we're hearing from him right now, it's almost like he's trying to distance himself, from the incident, and then make the incident sound like it was just, a fender bender,
But it wasn't. Crystal, thank you. Exactly. That's my point. It was what a lot of people were thinking.
And now people are going to question Garcia's credibility when it looks like he's covering up for one of his guys.
And that's the point. How did this come up yesterday? It came out in the investigative post. We're going to link you to our article on WKBW.com in the comments.
So there is a lawsuit from one of the
Right.
people whose car was hit. It's actually our most read story right now. So a lot of people are reading it. So get on there and read through it, because it's an interesting read. And I encourage you to watch it too, because when you see how they respond to these questions, it's telling.
Granville himself was standing there.
How I wouldn't have showed up if I was him. I would have stayed home.
It looked like
Stay
he
in the
saw a
back.
ghost.
Right.
He was, just standing there. And it's like almost until Kristen asked that question, he was just standing there being talked about in front of his face. And then to hear, okay, no, I'm not going to talk about that.
Yeesh.
Why not, my man?
Yeesh, yeesh, yeesh.
Anita says cover up, downplay, avoid. But is that really what we should be doing nowadays? I get what you're saying, but geez, that's a tough situation to be in.
Very tough.
Okay.
We made it through Wednesday, you guys. Pushing right along. We will see you back here tomorrow for Thursday. Have a great day.